Auschwitz, 1943. The sun had barely risen over the barbed wire fences when the first prisoners were led into Dr. Joseph Mengele's experimental compound. Among them were children, many of them twins, clutching each other's hands with eyes wide in fear. The atmosphere was a chilling mix of sterile precision and unimaginable terror. Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, stood at the center, clipboard in hand, his gaze cold and calculating. The guards moved with mechanical efficiency, herding the children forward, while the distant clatter of machinery and sharp orders echoed across the compound. Each child, each twin, was about to be subjected to experiments that defied humanity. The walls themselves seemed to close in, suffused with a silence that was broken only by the frightened whispers of children and the harsh commands of the guards, making the air heavy with anticipation and dread. The experiments were varied, cruel, and relentless. Children were subjected to injections of chemicals designed to alter eye color. Bright dyes, toxic solutions, and unknown substances were introduced into their eyes without anesthesia. Screams and tears filled the air as children writhed on tables, their small bodies trembling. Mengele recorded each reaction with meticulous notes, obsessed with finding patterns, with proving a twisted racial theory. Parents, siblings, and other prisoners watched in helpless horror, powerless to intervene, their own bodies shaking with fear for the young lives before them. Some prisoners tried to look away, unable to bear the sight, yet curiosity and fear anchored them to the spot. Each injection, each alteration, was a precise calculation in the doctor's mind. Yet to the children, it was an unbearable torment, a violation of innocence and trust. Beyond the injections, children were also subjected to surgeries without anesthesia. Limbs were removed, organs explored, and tissues excised while the victims remained conscious. The assistants moved with clinical detachment, performing each procedure as if it were a normal operation, entirely divorced from compassion or empathy. Mengele meticulously compared the twins, measuring, noting, and recording every reaction. Occasionally, one twin would be killed while the other was forced to endure watching the aftermath. Their cries and wails, piercing and unending, echoed against the cold stone walls, leaving indelible marks on the memories of those forced to witness them. The metallic scent of disinfectant mixed with the sharp tang of blood and fear, creating a pervasive atmosphere of dread that seemed to infect every corner of the camp. Illness became another instrument of cruelty. Mengele deliberately infected children with diseases, typhus, tuberculosis, and other deadly pathogens, to monitor the body's response under extreme conditions. Fevered bodies shook as the children suffered, the progression of disease documented for the sake of a warped curiosity. Every reaction, every moment of suffering was treated as data, a component of a cruel experiment. Twins were pitted against one another in this grim theater, survival often arbitrary, determined by the whim of those who saw them as subjects rather than humans. The moral and psychological weight of these acts created an atmosphere of omnipresent dread. Prisoners learned quickly to live in fear, to anticipate the next horrifying test, and to hold their breath for even the briefest respite. The children's eyes, once full of innocence and light, became mirrors of terror. They witnessed siblings and friends being subjected to unimaginable torment, some never to return. Parents could do nothing but hold themselves together, whispering prayers or muttering words of comfort that offered little solace. Guards enforced orders without question, indifferent to the pain, yet ever vigilant. The experimental compound became a theater of suffering. Each moment a calculated test, every action documented in precise detail. Yet amidst this horror, small, fleeting moments of humanity occasionally emerged. A hand held in secret, a whispered reassurance, but they were swallowed quickly by the enormity of cruelty surrounding them. The sense of time became distorted. Minutes stretched into unbearable eternities, each day indistinguishable from the last. Mengele's obsession with twins and the pursuit of genetic knowledge drove the experiments to their most chilling extremes. Some children were injected with substances to change their physical features. Others endured invasive surgeries to compare organs post-mortem. The dead were measured, dissected, and meticulously documented to feed the doctors' warped research. Every procedure reinforced the idea that ideology could justify acts of pure inhumanity, while survivors carried the weight of trauma that would last a lifetime. The horror of Auschwitz under Mengele became emblematic of the dangers of science divorced from morality, a stark warning of how knowledge without conscience can become a weapon against life itself. Each child, each record, each observation was a testament to cruelty rationalized as science, a moral abyss from which there was no escape for the innocent. Today, the testimonies of survivors and meticulous historical records serve as reminders of this dark chapter. The Nuremberg trials after World War II exposed Mengele's crimes, establishing principles that led to the Nuremberg Code and modern medical ethics. Survivors' stories recount not only the fear and pain, but the resilience, courage, and fleeting humanity that endured amidst the horrors. The legacy of Mengele's experiments is a testament to both human cruelty and the imperative of ethical vigilance, ensuring that the atrocities of Auschwitz are never forgotten and that the lessons of history guide future generations toward empathy and responsibility. It remains a chilling illustration of what happens when ideology and obsession eclipse morality, and a reminder of the need to protect innocence in every age. Surgical procedures without anesthesia are another horror of Mengele's experiments. Limbs were removed, organs explored, and tissues excised while the victims remained fully conscious, their eyes wide with terror and disbelief. Doctors and assistants carried out these procedures with chilling detachment, moving with the precision of surgeons but the cruelty of executioners. The wards echoed with the sounds of children's screams, the gurgle of blood, and the quiet scratching of pens on paper as Mengele meticulously recorded each detail. What to him was data and patterns, to the children was unimaginable pain, betrayal, and a violation of everything safe and human in their world. The small bodies writhed under the cold steel of surgical tools, every movement of agony captured for the doctor's obsessive comparisons. Mengele's fixation on twins drove the experiments to levels of cruelty that defy belief. He measured, prodded, and observed, recording every physiological reaction, comparing one twin against the other. No detail was too small. Eye color shifts, muscle responses, organ reactions, each was meticulously documented. Sometimes, one twin was subjected to lethal procedures to allow the other to be studied post-mortem. The surviving child, forced to witness the body of their sibling dissected and measured. The psychological torment was as devastating as the physical injuries. Parents, if present, could do nothing, their pleas ignored, their bodies trembling in helpless rage. The camp seemed suspended in an unnatural stillness, broken only by the cries, the scratching of ink on paper, and the occasional mechanical clank of instruments being sterilized and readied for the next child. Beyond the horrors of surgery, Mengele deliberately infected prisoners with diseases to test the body's responses to extreme conditions. Typhus, tuberculosis, and other deadly pathogens were introduced with cold precision, and the progression of illness was carefully documented in the doctor's files. Children and adults alike were left to suffer prolonged agony, often dying over days or weeks while their bodies were closely observed. Every fever, every cough, every convulsion was noted with an obsessive precision that stripped any remaining humanity from the experience. To Mengele, these victims were nothing more than living datasets, each suffering a variable in his perverse pursuit of pseudoscientific knowledge. Observers, fellow prisoners, and surviving children later recalled the horrifying details with a clarity that seemed impossible. The memories of agony etched indelibly into their minds. The wards became a theater of despair, a place where innocence was destroyed with bureaucratic efficiency. Children, their bodies weakened by malnutrition, disease, and terror, were placed side by side on cold tables, while assistants moved mechanically, obeying instructions without question. The metallic scent of blood and antiseptic mixed with the stench of fear, producing an almost tangible weight in the air. Witnesses recalled the quiet moments between procedures, the brief pause where a child would tremble, the quick glance of understanding between siblings, the whisper of comfort shared in secret. But these moments were fleeting, swallowed by the overwhelming cruelty that dominated each hour, each day, each experiment. Mengele's obsession extended to every facet of the children's bodies and minds. Beyond the immediate physical torment, he tested endurance, pain thresholds, and the body's reactions to repeated trauma. Limbs were frozen and thawed. Chemical compounds were injected repeatedly, and the sane child might be exposed to multiple procedures in succession. Through it all, the clinical detachment of the doctors, the cold efficiency of the assistants, and Mengele's own obsessive focus created an environment where fear became a constant companion. Prisoners learned to anticipate horror in every movement, every glance, every order, knowing that even the smallest gesture could result in pain, infection, or death. In this grim calculus, humanity was erased, leaving only suffering, observation, and documentation. The moral and psychological impact of these experiments extended far beyond the walls of the compound. Survivors carried scars not just on their bodies, but within their minds, struggling with nightmares, guilt, and trauma that would never fade. Parents who witnessed the horrors bore the weight of helplessness, the knowledge that their children were subjected to unimaginable cruelty. The meticulous documentation of Mengele's work, preserved in his own records and later in survivor testimonies, revealed not only the depth of human cruelty, but also the consequences of a mind untethered from ethics. Auschwitz, under Mengele, became a stark emblem of the dangers of dehumanized science, a chilling reminder that knowledge without conscience can become a weapon of unparalleled horror. Even today, the accounts of survivors continue to shock and educate. Historical analysis, survivor interviews, and archival records paint a picture of calculated cruelty, obsessive precision, and pervasive terror. The legacy of Mengele's experiments informed the Nuremberg Code and modern medical ethics, emphasizing consent, human dignity, and moral responsibility in research. Each story, each testimony, each detail preserved from Auschwitz is a warning to future generations, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge must never come at the expense of humanity, and that the horrors of dehumanized experimentation must never be repeated. Mengele's experiments extended to lethal studies on twins, pushing the boundaries of cruelty to unimaginable extremes. In countless instances, one twin was killed through lethal injection, suffocation, or other horrifying methods, while the other was forced to remain alive, a helpless witness to their sibling's death. The surviving twin's gaze, wide with fear and incomprehension, followed every motion, every procedure, while Mengele recorded measurements, organ weights, and physiological responses with obsessive precision. The deceased bodies were examined in grisly detail, dissected and compared to their twin counterparts. Every organ and tissue scrutinized, as if life itself had been reduced to a series of data points. The children's screams, muffled sobs, and silent tears became an unending soundtrack of agony that permeated the cold, sterile halls of the experimental wards. Survivors later recounted the haunting reality of these atrocities. Some children held out fleeting hope that they might be spared, that fate might somehow overlook them. But the grim truth of Mengele's experiments was almost always inescapable. Families were torn apart, siblings disappeared, and the once familiar faces of friends became instruments of terror. The camp transformed into a theater of horror, where every corner, every table, every corridor was steeped in fear. Ethical science had been obliterated, replaced by ideology, obsession, and deliberate sadism. Prisoners learned to anticipate the next experiment, every step measured against the potential for pain or death, and even a momentary glance toward a loved one could evoke panic, knowing what horrors might follow. Witnesses described the suffocating atmosphere of fear that enveloped the camp. The children's eyes, once bright with innocence, were replaced with glazed terror and resignation, reflecting a world that had betrayed them utterly. Their bodies were small, fragile, and trembling, yet their minds carried the weight of understanding beyond their years. Guards and assistants carried out orders with mechanical detachment, enforcing procedures with an unwavering commitment to cruelty. Small acts of humanity, whispered words of comfort, a shared piece of bread, a fleeting handhold, were swallowed quickly by the omnipresent horror. These fleeting gestures became treasured moments, brief reminders of what humanity could exist even in the darkest places. Yet they were nearly invisible against the relentless brutality surrounding the prisoners. Mengele's very presence dominated every aspect of life within the camp. His cold gaze and methodical observation created an atmosphere in which fear became a constant companion. Children learned to shrink at his approach, to anticipate his experiments, to steel themselves for what they could not possibly comprehend. The camp's halls, lined with cold stone and punctuated by the sharp sounds of medical instruments, echoed with a terror that was both immediate and inescapable. The twins, singled out for his relentless curiosity, were forced to endure experiences that no child should ever face. Each moment, a calculated blend of scientific observation and moral horror. The boundaries between life and death, observation and victimization, were obliterated, leaving only a stark landscape of suffering and control. The long-term impact on survivors was profound. Those who lived carried memories of unimaginable pain, of siblings lost in grotesque experiments, and of the constant threat of death hovering over every action. The psychological scars were as deep and lasting as the physical injuries inflicted during surgeries, injections, and infections. Yet the survivors' accounts also revealed moments of resistance, fleeting courage, and the human instinct to protect and console one another despite impossible circumstances. Historians and psychologists have documented these experiences extensively, using survivor testimonies to reconstruct the horrors of Mengele's work, ensuring that the world does not forget the depth of cruelty human beings are capable of when morality is abandoned for ideology. Through meticulous documentation, survivor narratives, and historical research, the world now understands the scale and intensity of Mengele's experiments. These atrocities informed the development of modern medical ethics, including the Nuremberg Code, emphasizing informed consent, human dignity, and ethical responsibility in research. Each record, Each testimony, each detailed account from Auschwitz serves as a powerful reminder. Science devoid of conscience can become a weapon of unimaginable cruelty. The stories of Mengelé's experiments, terrifying as they are, remain essential lessons for humanity, compelling us to confront our past, remember the victims, and uphold the moral imperatives that safeguard human life. Even decades later, the echo of these horrors resonates, a chilling testament to what happens when curiosity overrides compassion and ideology replaces empathy. The consequences of these experiments were horrific and far-reaching, leaving a legacy of pain and trauma that stretched long after the gates of Auschwitz closed. Survivors bore not only visible physical scars from the cruel procedures, but also invisible psychological wounds that lasted a lifetime. Memories of siblings lost in cold clinical experiments, of bodies dissected without compassion, and of the constant looming threat of death remained vivid, haunting their dreams and waking moments alike. Each day in the camp was a brutal lesson in fear, a constant reminder that life could be taken or altered in the most arbitrary and horrific ways. For many, the trauma was compounded by the loss of family, the obliteration of childhood innocence, and the knowledge that survival often depended on chance rather than courage or morality. Historical records, survivor testimonies, and meticulous research have preserved the reality of Mengelé's actions for future generations. These documents reveal the scale and systematic nature of the atrocities, showing how ideology and obsession can warp scientific ambition into instruments of cruelty. The detailed notes, drawings, and medical logs left behind by Mengele and his assistants are chilling evidence of both methodical precision and moral bankruptcy. They demonstrate how a veneer of science was used to justify inhuman acts, turning children and adults into mere subjects for observation. Scholars and educators have drawn on these materials to teach the full weight of what occurred, ensuring that the lessons of Auschwitz remain vivid and accessible. These records serve not only as documentation of crime, but also as enduring warnings about the dangers of dehumanized science and unchecked authority in any era. The experiences of survivors underscore the deep emotional and psychological impact of the experiments. Nightmares, flashbacks, and a pervasive sense of vulnerability were common among those who lived through the horrors. Many recounted the constant tension of anticipating the next procedure, the fear of being singled out, and the helplessness of witnessing the suffering of loved ones. Yet, even amidst the despair, survivors also reported fleeting moments of human connection and resilience, a whispered word of encouragement, a shared morsel of food, a hand briefly held for comfort. These small acts, though overshadowed by horror, reminded both victims and observers that humanity can persist even in the darkest circumstances. They offer a glimpse of the indomitable spirit that allowed some to endure and ultimately to tell their stories to the world. The legacy of Mengelé's experiments profoundly influenced the development of modern medical ethics. The Nuremberg Code, established in the wake of World War II, was a direct response to the atrocities committed in Auschwitz and elsewhere. It emphasized that human subjects must never be used in experiments without their voluntary, informed consent, that the well-being of participants must always take precedence over the pursuit of knowledge, and that researchers have an ethical responsibility to prevent harm. These principles became foundational for contemporary ethical standards in medicine and scientific research worldwide. They serve as both a legal and moral framework, ensuring that the kind of dehumanized experimentation practiced by Mengele cannot be repeated under the guise of science or ideology. The lessons learned from these events continue to shape policies, education, and practice, highlighting the importance of vigilance, accountability, and the protection of human dignity in all scientific endeavors. While the horrors of Auschwitz cannot be undone, the meticulous documentation of what occurred, along with survivor testimonies and educational efforts, ensures that the lessons of history remain alive. Each story, each record, and each personal account is a stark reminder of the capacity for cruelty when morality is abandoned and ideology takes precedence over compassion. The knowledge gained from studying these events reinforces the vital importance of ethical oversight, informed consent, and human-centered research. Auschwitz stands as one of history's most haunting reminders of the consequences of unchecked power and the dehumanization of science. It challenges future generations to remember, reflect, and act, ensuring that the protection of human life and dignity is never compromised in the pursuit of knowledge or ambition. These lessons continue to resonate today, guiding ethics, education, and human understanding across the globe. Even decades later, the legacy of Mengele's experiments continues to shape collective memory. Survivors' narratives, combined with historical and medical documentation, provide a chilling testament to the dangers of conflating curiosity with cruelty. Each testimony reminds us of the fragile boundary between knowledge and inhumanity, the moral imperative to prioritize human welfare, and the enduring impact of trauma on those who survive. Auschwitz is more than a historical location. It is a symbol of vigilance, ethical responsibility, and the need for humanity to guide science. By preserving these stories, by teaching their lessons, and by honoring the victims, we ensure historians, educators, and content creators continue to study and present the events of Auschwitz to the public, ensuring that the stories of victims and survivors remain vivid and impactful. The experiences of children subjected to Joseph Mengele's experiments are recounted not only as historical facts, but as profound moral lessons about the value of empathy, ethics, and humanity in a world that can so easily descend into cruelty. Each testimony, each diary, and each recorded account offers viewers and readers an immersive insight into the depths of human cruelty, while also highlighting the resilience, courage, and enduring spirit of those who survived. These narratives compel us to confront uncomfortable truths and reflect on the importance of protecting human life under all circumstances, recognizing the potential consequences when ideology supersedes compassion. The horrors recounted are both specific and universal. Children torn from their families, subjected to chemical injections, surgeries without anesthesia, and deliberate exposure to deadly diseases serve as haunting symbols of what can happen when scientific curiosity is unmoored from morality. These experiences, while extreme, remind us of the fragility of innocence and the enduring impact of trauma. Survivors' stories go beyond shock. They are lessons in perseverance, in holding on to humanity, even when surrounded by systematic brutality. Small acts of defiance, fleeting moments of empathy, and the quiet resilience of those forced to endure unimaginable suffering become powerful testaments to human strength amidst cruelty. As we recount the horrors of Auschwitz, the name Josef Mengele remains synonymous with inhumanity and moral corruption. His cold detachment, obsessive pursuit of pseudoscientific knowledge, and ruthless disregard for human life turned the camp into a laboratory of fear, suffering, and death. Yet within this darkness, the testimonies of survivors shine as beacons of memory and warning. They illuminate the consequences of dehumanization, providing stark examples of what can occur when authority is left unchecked and ethical principles are abandoned. Each story preserved, each recollection shared, is a crucial reminder that vigilance, remembrance, and education are essential tools to prevent history from repeating its darkest chapters. The moral lessons embedded in these narratives extend far beyond the historical context of World War II. They challenge us to examine contemporary issues of ethics in science, medicine, and governance. By studying Mengelé's experiments and their repercussions, we are reminded that ethical vigilance is not optional, it is essential. Science, research, and discovery are powerful tools, but when divorced from empathy and moral responsibility, they can be weaponized to inflict immense suffering. The story of Auschwitz and the children who suffered there forces us to confront these uncomfortable realities and to actively uphold principles that prioritize the well-being, dignity, and rights of all individuals. Even decades after the liberation of Auschwitz, the lessons of Mengelé's experiments resonate globally. Survivor testimonies, historical analyses, and educational programs continue to serve as a bulwark against forgetting. These narratives instill a sense of moral responsibility in viewers and learners, emphasizing that remembrance is not passive. It is an active engagement with history, ethics, and human rights. Each account challenges us to reflect on the delicate balance between knowledge and morality, curiosity and conscience, authority and empathy. They remind us that vigilance and ethical reflection are ongoing responsibilities, essential for preventing the recurrence of such atrocities in any form or context. The story of Mengele and his experiments is therefore not only a tale of tragedy, but a clarion call to moral vigilance. It urges society to ensure that science, research, and discovery serve humanity rather than ideology, cruelty, or personal obsession. By preserving these memories, documenting the past, and educating future generations, we create a framework in which knowledge is tempered by ethics, and the value of human life remains paramount. The horrors of Auschwitz, the suffering of children, and the cruelty of a man obsessed with twisted ideals are lessons etched into history, urging constant reflection, ethical action, and a commitment to empathy. In remembering, recounting, and teaching these stories, we honor the victims and fortify society against the ever-present risk of repeating such inhumanity.